Welcome to Phillip Island, Victoria in Australia. What a setting we have for this great sporting contest, the Little Penguin Sea to Dune race. Nervous moments always as they gather on the beach, the tension mounting, and away they go. There's the defending champion, wearing his familiar navy blue and white, great waddling style. Another pre-race favourite though, losing touch with the pack. Maybe that's why. A few too many fish in the day's feeding. There's a familiar face, Skip McIntyre, 8 times a champion back in the 90s, a very successful coach now, keeping a keen eye on proceedings. This the leading group, 1 or 2 still able to put on a show for the camera, others just ploughing straight over it. Some resorting to shortcuts. Sad that cheating has crept into this beautiful sport. The judges will have a look at that. But up at the front, the pace is relentless, closing in on those sand dunes that will offer a bed for the night. The fatigue starting to tell. Who's got the finishing kick up on the outside? What a turn of pace from that one, whichever one it is. No answer from the rest, and he takes victory. What a win. There we are, into the Burrow, building an extension with his winnings, and back tomorrow to try and defend his title here on Phillip Island.
Welcome to Live Penguin TV. My name's Megan and I'm going to be your host tonight as we watch the world's smallest species of penguin, our little penguins coming out of the water, crossing the beach and making their way back to their burrows here on Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia. Now we are here on Phillip Island looking out along Summerlands Beach and Bass Strait, and another word for Phillip Island is also Milau. And that is the name given to it by the Bunurong, and they are the traditional custodians of the land here on Milau on Phillip Island. So I would just like to start off by acknowledging the Bunurong and their elders past, present and emerging as the traditional custodians of the land that we're watching the penguins on tonight, that I'm lucky enough to live, work and learn on. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of any lands that you all might be watching on tonight. So if you're joining us from anywhere in Australia or around the world and there are traditional custodians of the land you're on, pop that in the comments, let us know where you are and let us know who those custodians of the land are. And the Bunurong have been coming here for thousands of years, caring for this beautiful country that we're lucky enough to see little penguins on tonight. And I would also like to say that it is National Science Week. So tonight, I do want to have a little bit of a focus on some of the research and conservation work that's going on here at Phillip Island and Phillip Island National Parks. So we will be talking a little bit about some of that sciencey stuff tonight. I am also joined by Viv tonight. Viv, do you want to come on in and tell us what you'll be doing?
Hello, everybody. So like Megan said, we do want to focus on science and technology tonight. So please ask us all your really complicated questions focused on our research department, and Megan will do her best to answer those. And as well, get in your guesses for how many penguins came in last night. And I will hopefully tell you that very soon.
Great, thank you, Viv. So if you were watching last night, if you are a regular water watcher, as we like to call our regular watchers here on Live Penguin TV, You might have your guesses as to how many penguins you think crossed the beach. So pop those in the comments, and we'll come back to Viv in a few minutes and see how many penguins came in last night. And we do, of course, count the penguins each and every night here at the Penguin Parade. So we do have Ranger Sally counting the penguins. So as we wait for that first group to come up, she'll be looking, training her binoculars on the water, waiting for that first group to pop up from the ocean. But we may actually be able to see that first group before they come out of the water, because they've been out there for the last couple of hours. Those penguins that have decided that tonight's the night they want to come back onto land. They've been out there forming groups that we call rafts. Now, it's a little bit rough out there tonight, so we might not be able to see any rafts just yet, but they do look like a black line on the surface of the water. So keep your eyes peeled, and we may be able to see them coming through the white water as they get a little bit closer. And while they're out there forming those rafts, they will be calling out to each other to group together. And they make a noise that we call a huck. So they'll be going, huck, 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 huck. Thanks, Viv. Talking to each other, grouping together, forming those big groups for safety in numbers as they cross the beach. So they are a lot safer when they have a big group of penguins. It's harder for any predators to pick out an individual penguin. And they are quite safe when they are out at the water. It is what we're seeing tonight, them crossing the beach to get onto land. It is the most dangerous part of their day. We call it their dangerous dash. So it's when they're the most vulnerable to predators. So they come in those groups for safety in numbers. And that's also why they're waiting until it's dark. And you may have noticed we started the stream a little bit earlier tonight because it is very dark right now. There's a lot of clouds. It's looking a bit stormy out there. The tide is high. There's not much scary beach to cross, so we're thinking the penguins might be a little bit earlier. They don't have little penguin watchers to decide when they're going to come back. They're just looking up at the horizon behind where our camera is, waiting until they think that it's dark enough that they're going to be safe to come out of the water. And when they do come out, Sally's going to have a really tough time counting them because the tide is so high. There is not much beach to count them on at all. Usually we like to wait till they get more than halfway across the beach to count them before they run back into the water. If they get a fright, I don't think there's going to be much running back tonight because they are pretty much going to be straight out of the water and up safe over the rocks.
Oh, unless the goose is back.
Oh no, the pesky goose. It's been troubling our penguins. I haven't seen it. Well, I saw it further up the highway earlier tonight, but hopefully it's not going to come down and cause any mischief tonight. And Viv, do you have the penguin numbers for last night? How many penguins were there?
So last night we had a whopping 1,003 penguins, and Marie was very close at 1,005.
Oh, very close.
Yeah.
Only 2 penguins off. Well done, Marie. So we do get different penguin numbers each night. So some nights we might get a few more penguins than others. And that is because they're not all coming in each and every night. They do spend about 80% of their life out at sea. So that's where they spend most of their time. It's what they're best at. When I think I can see our first raft coming in. If you can see this kind of black mass moving quickly through the water, I'll try and zoom in on it. There we are. They're hopefully going to surf this wave. I'm going to follow them as they come up to shore. So we're, with the high tide, we're lucky we can actually see them swimming a little bit closer. It's not something you get to see all that often. And it is what they're really good at. And you'll notice that they are quite hard to see in the water. We can only see them right now because they're in a big group. An individual penguin is really well camouflaged and hard to see out there. They have what we call countercoloration. So all of their back is blue. There they are. Even the tops of their beak and bottom of their feet. So when they're floating on the surface, they are blending really well with the surface of the ocean. If you're looking down, and if you're looking up at them from below, they have little white bellies that make them so conspicuous. Now that they're up on the sand, it does mean that they blend in with the sky if you're looking up at them from below when they're in the ocean. And that's really important because they don't come here every day, like I said, so they don't come here to sleep. They can sleep out on the ocean, floating on the surface, and they only need to sleep for about 4 minutes at a time, which is very impressive. I wish I could do that. And it's not even just a power nap, it's actually a full sleep cycle, takes them 4 minutes. So very impressive for our little penguins. spending all that time out in the water, but these guys have decided to come back onto land tonight. Winter is when we tend to see fewer penguins crossing the beach because they don't have as much reason to be here. So they mainly come onto land for breeding and for molting. And molting, when they lose and replace their feathers, that happens around the start of the year, around February and March. But we are heading into the breeding season now. Heading into spring and summer is when our penguins are getting ready to have some babies. So they will be coming back tonight, probably to do a bit of burrow and nest renovation, maybe catching up with their partners, maybe some special penguin cuddles, if you know what I mean. And we've actually the last few nights seen some females who look like they're getting ready to lay eggs. So fingers crossed in the next month or so we might have a few more eggs, and then in the month after that, it does take just over a month to incubate some eggs, and we might get some little penguin chicks hopefully appearing in the colony. Last year the breeding season started quite early. It did start, I think we had our first eggs in July that actually hatched and were successfully raised to fledging. So that was quite early, but the breeding season does change depending on the conditions. And we do know this because of our regular research work that goes on here at Phillip Island Nature Parks. And we are a non-for-profit conservation organisation. I'm just going to go to the Penguin Highway. Sorry. There they go. So we are a conservation organisation funded by tourism. So you may see a few people down on the viewing stands tonight because we are at the moment open to regional Victorians who are able to come and visit. And we do hope to see as many of you back here as soon as possible when you're allowed to do so. Because if you do buy a ticket to come and see the penguins here at the Penguin Parade, or if you go to the Koala Reserve, Churchill Island Heritage Farm, the Nobbies, Antarctic Journey, or even if you buy a souvenir or something to eat or drink from us here at the nature parks, those profits do go back into conservation research and education to help learn more about our wildlife and our wild places here on Phillip Island and to manage and conserve them. So we do look after over 20% of Phillip Island, including the entire southern coastline, many of our beautiful beaches, wetlands and woodlands that are free to visit as well, and to help look after the animals that live there. And to fund our research work, like I was mentioning. So we do have, I think there's the moment about 7 research sites around the Summerland Peninsula in our penguin colony. Oh, and there's a pesky goose. There he is there. So we do have about 10% of our penguin colony down here at the Penguin Parade. So it is only about 3,000 to 4,000 penguins right here at this site we're looking at. But in the whole colony that goes for about another 3 kilometres up to the right-hand side of the camera there, we do have about 32,000 little penguins. So it is the largest little penguin colony. So we do have quite a few sites that we study. We couldn't study all 32,000 penguins. So we do have specific research burrows, we call them. Oh, and here's another group of penguins.
All right, are you ready for some questions?
Oh, sure.
So this is going to link very nicely into some other things that we've got. Have we noticed climate change affecting the penguins?
That's a good one.
That
And I
is.
might, I'll actually tell you a bit more about the research burrows because that links well into that. So as we follow these penguins around and I scroll into the colony, you'll see some wooden boxes. And you might have seen them if you've watched Live Penguin TV before. And we do use those for research. If you see a number on one of those boxes, which you'll see with the ones down here at our Penguins Plus viewing area, those burrows get checked once a fortnight. And we will lift up the lid, our researchers will look inside those burrows and check who's home. So it's checking burrow attendance. So any penguins that live in those burrows or in that area will likely have a microchip in the back of their neck, like one you might have in your pet, a cat or dog. So we can scan them and we know who that penguin is and we can monitor them over time. So if they keep coming back to the same area, which they do the majority of the time, we can see things like their divorce rates, their breeding success, how much they're moving, whether they're coming back to where they were born. All these really interesting things that help us learn more and inform some of our conservation decisions about our little penguins. But another reason for those wooden boxes, because they are a lot easier to check, lift a lid, check on the penguins inside, rather than put your hand down a hole in the ground, which is a natural penguin burrow, where there may or may not be a snake inside. And there's a research burrow. We'll scroll past here with the number on it. And I have checked some natural sites before, and putting your arm down in those burrows, as well as, not being ideal for snakes. We do have really thick, long gloves for protection. It's also really, really messy. If you know much about penguins, you might know that they have the highest velocity poo of any animal, and especially when there's chicks in a burrow, there is a lot of penguin poo everywhere. So you can't even check a natural site without getting a bit of that on you. But the burrows, the boxes are a huge help in that research work. And there's a wallaby on the hill. And the boxes have also been put out in areas that have been disturbed by people. So the Summerland Peninsula, where our colony of now 32,000 strong penguins now live, actually used to be a housing estate. So there was 183 houses up there on the Summerland Peninsula in the middle of the penguins' homes. And that led to, as well as the introduction of foxes, led to huge declines in penguin numbers. So we got down to about 8,000 to 12,000 penguins here on the Summerland Peninsula. And our researchers at the time thought that we weren't going to have any penguins left by 1997. So the government made a huge decision in 1985 to get rid of the houses. So to buy back that entire housing estate for the conservation of little penguins. There's more of them on the highway. So it's the biggest housing buyback for any one species in the world that we're aware of. So it's a fantastic thing that was done, and now our penguin numbers have more than doubled back to that 32,000. But the habitat hasn't fully recovered. So where there was a house or a road, or even here at the Penguin Parade, where people used to walk through the penguin habitat or drive their cars right down to the beach to come and watch the penguin parade, those areas are still recovering. So where the ground is hard and compact or there's not enough vegetation, we use those wooden boxes to help encourage penguins back into those areas. And that's been a huge success. The male penguins are the ones that dig the burrows. I like to think the boys can be a bit lazy. If they can take a free home, they will. So they'll happily use our little wooden boxes. And there goes a bandicoot. Oh, are you going to go for a swim? Sorry, I'm getting to the question, but I can't not try and focus on this little bandicoot right now. Which is another huge success story here on Phillip Island. Part of that penguin protection plan that led to the removal of the houses included a fox eradication program, which meant that we were able to eradicate foxes from Phillip Island. We were declared officially fox-free in 2017, and when that happened, we were able to get 67 of these little eastern barred bandicoots that you can see on the screen right now. They are a little marsupial that was classified as extinct in the wild. So they were bred in captivity at Melbourne Zoo and released into some fenced off areas where predators like foxes were removed, because that was their main threat. Oh, are you going to swim? Oh no, he's going to bounce through the water. So we were lucky enough to have some of those bandicoots released here on the Summerland Peninsula in 2017. That was a big jump behind the bush. And now we estimate we have over 300. So this animal that was once extinct in the wild, we just got to see running around right in front of us here on the camera. If you do come out to Phillip Island, they're becoming more and more common. They're spreading further and further onto the island, and it's just fantastic to see that they were once extinct on mainland mainland Australia. Oh, here's another group of penguins. And now we get to see them thriving here in the absence of foxes. So that is a huge success, and another thing that is funded by our tourism here on Phillip Island. And if you do want to help out and you're not able to visit us, you can actually donate to the Penguin Foundation. And the Penguin Foundation does choose which research projects those donations then go towards. Things like our penguin weighbridges or tracking programs, or even our wildlife hospital where we care for sick and injured wildlife. So I'm so happy we got to see a bandicoot. We're actually doing some bandicoot monitoring next week, hopefully, to go out and check on our bandicoot population out on Churchill Island and see how they're going as well. And back to the penguin boxes that I was talking about, which have been a huge success for our penguins to use, but have now started to become a bit of a problem. So the question that I had probably 5 hours ago was about climate change and how that's affecting our penguins. And one thing that we have seen is that the penguins in those boxes have been getting too hot. When we have hot days, and particularly heat waves, so multiple hot days in a row. And the penguins are stuck on land during the day, so they can't go out to the sea during the day because they're vulnerable to those birds of prey that are out hunting during the day. So a penguin in its box can't really do much to cool down if it gets really hot. Normally they're in a hole in the ground covered by vegetation, so they're a lot better insulated and their burrows stay a lot cooler. But those boxes have started to become a bit of an ecological trap. So we actually had, I think it was in 2019, was it, Viv? We had a big heat wave in the middle of our penguin molting season, so around February, March. And when penguins are molting, they have to lose and replace all their feathers in about 2 to 3 weeks that they have to spend on land. And they're not waterproof, they can't go out to sea. So we had quite a few penguins becoming heat stressed. And unfortunately, quite a few penguins died from heat stress. We weren't able to get out there and cool them all down quick enough. So something that we now are working on, our researchers, there is a PhD student, Lauren, who's looking at different ways to change the roofs of these burrows, or just make changes to these little wooden boxes so that we can help the penguins stay cooler when we do have more of those extreme weather events and heat waves, and with some of those rising temperatures. So if you actually want to hear more about that, there is actually a talk virtually on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Lauren will be there, Andre, Professor Penguin we like to call him, will be there, and Dr. Beck McIntosh, who is our seal expert, will all be talking about how climate change is affecting our marine life. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. Viv's going to pop the link in the comments, and that's a special event we have going for National Science Week. So check that out on Thursday, 1 o'clock, if you're looking for something to do and there's a big group of penguins and you do want to learn a bit more about how our marine life is dealing with climate change. And one thing we have noticed with our penguins here is that their breeding season has become earlier. Like I said, we had a really early breeding season last year because penguins use environmental cues, particularly an increasing sea surface temperature, to trigger their breeding. So that they're breeding when there's the most food available out in the ocean, when they don't have to travel too far. They can come back almost every day to feed their hungry little chicks back at home. So we have started seeing it being a bit warmer, a bit earlier, and penguins breeding earlier. We've even started to see something called our autumn breeding attempt. So often penguins would start to, maybe court and renovate their burrows in autumn, thinking, oh, this feels like spring, maybe it's breeding season. But it didn't really end up with any eggs or chicks in the colony. So it used to be called false breeding. We've had to change that to be called the autumn breeding attempt, because now we are having penguins laying eggs in autumn. We are having penguins raising chicks. I think a couple of years ago, the penguins pretty much, they finished breeding, they molted, then they started breeding again and bred right through their normal breeding season. So we've seen penguins being able to have more chicks with the longer breeding season. So instead of having one clutch, they may be having one, fledging those 2 chicks, and having another clutch, occasionally even a third clutch, which has increased their breeding success incredibly. And we do always have those natural fluctuations in breeding success as well. Years go up and down, but we are definitely seeing them breeding a bit earlier. But if the temperatures do keep going up, it may impede their ability to breed in summer. I certainly don't want to find out what's going to happen. So hopefully we don't reach that highest degree of warming. But Andre's the expert on all of that, so I would recommend checking out the talk on Thursday and learning a little bit more. And do we have a question, Viv? I feel like I've been talking forever.
So I had an interesting one. Is there a smell or pheromone that the females emit to let the males know that they're ready to mate?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And we don't actually believe that penguins use their sense of smell when they're on land. And a study was actually done, and it was funded by the Penguin Foundation to study the use of smell for penguins on land. We believe they use their sense of smell when they're out at sea to find food, but not so much on land. So I don't think that they would release any pheromones or anything to indicate they're ready to mate with the males. What they actually do is the males come back onto land before the females, a week or two before, at the start of the breeding season. And the males are kind of the ones that say, hey ladies, I'm ready, because they go back to wherever they want to nest for the season. They'll renovate their burrow, make sure it's looking good, and then they'll wait till the girls start coming up onto land. And they'll wait at the front of their burrows, keep coming in during that time of year, and they'll stand there puffing out their chest, looking really handsome. And if they see a suitable female, they'll do a bit of a dance, maybe sing a song. And if she's impressed, then they may become partners or mates for that season. So it is kind of the male saying, hey ladies, look at my burrow, I'm ready to breed. And then the female saying, oh yeah, okay, I see what you've done there. I'm impressed by your burrow. You're a fine looking specimen. I'll be your partner. And they do this every year. So they don't mate for life like some other species of penguin. Our little penguins are what we call socially monogamous within a season. However, they are also promiscuous. So they do sneak around and cheat on their partners, but they will stay together in the same burrow for that season. And then at the end of each breeding season, there's usually somewhere between an 18 to 50% divorce rate. So sorry to say, they do get divorced, and if they do split up, they don't split everything 50-50. The male usually keeps the burrow, and the female has to find a new partner and a new burrow. But like I said, she doesn't usually struggle too much. She just has to go out and find the guy with the nicest house and the nicest song and dance. Not too different to people, is it? All right. Do we have another question, Viv?
Yeah, another interesting one.
Yeah.
What sort of blue are the penguins' feathers? And are they iridescent?
Ooh. What sort of blue are their feathers?
And I learned an interesting fact about the penguins' blue recently. I don't know if you know it, but I'll get into that if you don't.
Oh, okay. I'll give it my best go first. And that camera's not really focusing. Hang on, I'll go back to the main camera. So I believe that no bird actually has blue pigments in their feathers. It is an effect kind of the light and the way the feathers are structured. I would say that little penguins are our only species of penguin that has blue feathers. All the other penguins are black and white, and these little guys are blue and white. So the blue is to do with the structure of the feathers. What do you have?
That is exactly what I have.
That's what you were going to say?
It's really interesting that it's not a pigment like every other natural blue, that it is the structure.
It is beautiful. I'm glad I got that one right.
You did, good job.
And keep those interesting questions going. I really like to have a question that kind of makes me think, and I have to try and figure it out or give you my best answer, or even say that I don't know. If you can make me say that I don't know, I'll be very happy to have to go and figure out the answer, because we're all still learning. As much as I might think I know maybe almost everything about penguins, there's still so much that we don't know. And it may not just be something that I don't know, it may be something that we don't know at all. And that's why we do research. That's why we are still studying these little penguins. Our penguin count is one of the longest running bird studies in Australia. We've been checking nest boxes since the penguin study group started in the 1960s. So there has been research going on with these little penguins for such a long time, and that's how we know so much that we are able to share with all of you. But we are still learning, especially about what they do out at sea. So we do know a lot about what they do when they're here on land. We can see them, we can watch them, we can observe what they're doing. But something that's a lot harder to learn about is that 80% of their life, most of the time that they spend out in the water. And that is becoming a lot easier, thankfully, with technology. And I zoomed in just as a little wallaby came down to drink from the puddle there. So there is a lot of technology that we're lucky enough to be able to use here at Phillip Island Nature Parks. And something I was lucky enough to do last year was help Professor Penguin help Andre with our penguin tracking program. So it used to be big radio trackers with antennas if you wanted to track an animal, and now we can use little GPS devices about this big. They actually look almost exactly like a little eraser encased in some waterproof polymer with that little taper at the front like a eraser to make them aerodynamic when we put them on the back of a penguin. And that means that we can put a tracker on a penguin for one trip. The penguin comes back, we can take that tracker off, plug it into a computer, and it tells us where they are with little GPS locators, tells us where they've been, but it can also tell us how deep they've been diving. It has a fancy little switch that turns off the GPS when the penguins go underwater, so we're not wasting battery trying to take a GPS point when the GPS is too far underwater. And it even tells us how quick the penguins are going, so it has an accelerometer on it. So we can put this fancy little device on the back of a penguin, let the penguin do what it does naturally, goes out to sea, comes back, take the tracker off, and we just get so much information about what the penguins are doing. And you might wonder why that's important, because if we want to look after penguins, looking after their home here on land is a really small part of that. We also have to look after their habitat out at sea, which is what's really most at threat. From climate change, like we mentioned, overfishing, all these things that are affecting our penguins out in the ocean. Marine debris is a massive one. So if we can see where the penguins are going to find their food, we can see those feeding hotspots, we can learn which areas of the ocean need protecting. So that's something Andre does a lot of work on, planning marine protected areas, trying to make them dynamic so that we can protect the penguins in the place where they spend the most of their time. And if you do actually want to learn a bit more about that, Andre does talk about that on our Nature Unfiltered, our Phillip Island Nature Parks podcast. And the newest episode actually came out today, fittingly enough, where we do have Andre talking about the time that penguins spend out at sea. And that's with myself and Sky talking to Andre. And Sky also did a challenge. She counted the penguins, which she'd never done before. So if you do want to see how hard it is to count penguins, you can see in our story on Facebook, our highlights reel on Instagram, Sky's little challenge to have to go out and count the penguins, or check out the podcast Nature Unfiltered on Spotify or through the website if you want to learn a bit more about penguins out at sea. But again, there's still so much to learn, and I've been really privileged to be a part of some of our penguin research. We do also have a lot of research that happens off the end of the peninsula out on Seal Rock. So I mentioned Beck will be talking on the talk on Thursday, and she does a lot of work out there studying our Australian fur seals. The technology I was talking about has greatly improved the ability to study the seals as well, because they, we can't just walk out to the seal colony like we can drive out to the penguin parade, walk out and see the penguins. Seal Rocks is a crazy place, battered by the ocean. It's slippery, it's covered in seals and seal poop, and it's a big effort to take a boat out there every couple of months to go and monitor the seal population. So they now actually are able to use a drone to study the seals instead of going out there and trying to count them all. Oh, there's a lot of penguins on the highway. We actually now fly a drone out over Seal Rocks, take a whole lot of photos, and that goes up online to our Seal Spotter portal, which is a citizen science program where you can go online and help count seals, which is actually really fun. It's more fun than it sounds. Count how many adults, count how many pups there are, and it helps with our research and monitoring that population, the number of pups that are born, and also looking for seals with entanglements. So I mentioned marine debris is an issue for our penguins out at sea. It is also a huge issue for our seals. They quite often get entangled in things like rope and fishing line, box strap, hats, things that shouldn't be out there. So if you do hop on Seal Spotter, you might even see a seal with an entanglement that you can click on, point out, and then our researchers will know that it's out there, and when they go on their next trip out to Seal Rocks, they can try and find that seal and remove the entanglement. So if you do want to jump on Seal Spotter, again, I think Viv popped out in the comments. She's so onto it tonight. And every night, Viv. And you can count seals and help with our research, and you may even save a life by helping us find an entanglement. We're almost out of time, aren't we?
Yes, we're definitely over time. We've gone a little bit over, but that's okay. I'll let you go with one more question, maybe.
Yes, that sounds good to me.
Do penguins have teeth?
Okay, that's an interesting one. And penguins don't have teeth. So birds don't have teeth. They have their beaks to catch their food. Penguins have quite a sharp beak. I've been bitten by a penguin. You don't want to mess with them. They have a very sharp beak for catching food. Something they do have is inside their mouth, they have these fleshy little spikes. They're spines that are kind of point downwards in their throat. So once they swallow a fish, those spines help push the fish downwards. And they don't chew it, they'll swallow it whole, but they do have those little kind of spiny, fleshy things in their mouth. I don't know how else to describe them. It probably sounds really gross, but
You really just have to Google it and have a look, because you can't describe it any better than that.
Yeah. Do have a Google if you game and see what they look like. But no teeth for a penguin, but they do have those little spines that help push the food down to help them swallow it, which is really interesting and really strange to look at. It kind of looks like a little creepy sea creature.
It definitely does.
That's my last question.
I mean, it's up to you.
Can we have one more? I haven't answered many questions. We'll have one more,
okay,
and then we'll finish up.
Alright, so you talked about our nightly count earlier. Mm-hmm. What research does that go towards?
So the count is kind of... that's a good question. It doesn't tell us the overall penguin numbers in the colony, but it's certainly an indicator. I think there's 2 shell gritters on the Penguin Highway.
Our Wattle Watchers have just pointed that out as well.
Sorry, I'm going to get sidetracked for 1 second because this is really exciting because this is what I was talking about earlier. The female penguin's getting ready to lay eggs, and the reason we know that they're doing that is because they're walking from their burrows down to the ocean, and the only reason a penguin does that at night time is because they're getting ready to lay eggs. So they don't want to go out to sea and accidentally lay their eggs out there. They're going to lay really soon, but they have a pregnancy craving. They want some extra calcium to help them build the shell of their egg. So they're going to walk down to the beach, eat some little pieces of shell to help them build the shell of their egg, and then go back up again to their burrows. What was I talking about?
I'm just wondering now, is that why my pregnancy craving was milkshakes? Is it the calcium?
Oh, did you lay an egg?
I don't think so. I'll have to double check when I get home.
We'll
you were talking about the research of the nightly count.
That's right. Yes. So the penguin count was actually the first sign that there was something wrong with the penguin colony when the houses and the foxes were having that huge impact in the 80s. That was the first thing that indicated that the numbers were dropping. And the numbers do fluctuate over different times of the year. So we have a lot more when they're breeding in spring and summer and in winter. So the count certainly can give us a bit of an indication of what's going on in the colony. So whether the breeding season is starting or not. It does give us an overall trend. So it has been going since 1968. And that really long-term trend of penguin numbers over different times of the year and over different years can tell us about what's going on in the colony and the size of the colony. We do also do something else every 3 years called the Penguin Survey, which Jordan did, I think it was 2 years ago, so we'll be due for another one next year. So that's where we go out and do transects. So we have little posts all around the peninsula, and we do a transect. So pretty much draw a line from those posts and count the number of active penguin burrows we find along those transects to see if the penguin active number of burrows, which indicates the number of breeding penguins, And that's what gives us a number of, we estimate there's about 32,000 in the colony. So we can see whether the colonies increase, decrease, and whether they're moving further inland. And it has been a big trend since the 80s, moving upwards, and now they're pretty stable around that 32,000. So the count tells us a lot, particularly because it's been going for such a long time, over a broad time scale, that we can see those trends. And then we have more specific information that we get from things like the burrow checks and the penguin survey. So I think that's a really good question, nice thing to end on. I hope you've all learnt a little bit more. I was really excited to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the research work that we do here at Phillip Island Nature Parks. It's something that I really love being involved in and I'm really interested about. So I hope you all learnt something new. And if you loved watching the penguins, tune in again tomorrow night, the next night. I think this is going for till the end of the week.
Yes, a couple of people have asked if we're planning to extend since our lockdown's extending, and we have no plans at the moment, but maybe some magic will happen. We don't know.
We'll see what happens. It's above our pay grade. We
Definitely.
would love to keep bringing the penguins to you each and every night. It is something we love doing. We do hope to see everyone back here watching the penguins as soon as possible. In the meantime, if you do want to help us out, you can donate to the Penguin Foundation. Adopt a penguin, symbolically, of course. Adopt a goose if you order it. Adopt a bandicoot. I'm so happy we saw that bandicoot for so long tonight. And get involved in some citizen science. So even if you're at home, you can't get out and do too much, jump on Seal Spotter, count some seals. I'm sure there's lots of other citizen science programs you can do at home. Check out the program for the National Science Week. That talk with Beck and Lauren and Andre will be happening on Thursday at 1 o'clock. So check that out again. And get your guesses in for how many penguins you think cross the beach tonight. Obviously, they're still coming in. And hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow night. And thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
You want to come in and say goodbye, Viv?
Yes, all right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.